Welcome back. I'm very excited about our next speaker because I have the privilege of doing the interview. There's a video intro. Let's watch it.
He was in Williamsburg, Brooklyn before the hipsters, and he was brewing craft beers before it was a thing. Back in the days when Bud and Coors reigned supreme, Steve Hindy opened up Brooklyn Brewery and began a revolution of taste.
Most people, the reaction was, this beer, it's so dark and bitter. Why don't you make a beer like Heineken or Budweiser? We worked hard educating people, and now people know what craft beer is.
Educate them he did, with an iconic logo and flavors as diverse as the people in its namesake borough. Hindy and his brewery have won over taste buds from Staten Island to Stockholm. And while he's expanded globally, Hindy and Brooklyn Brewery have maintained their authentic Brooklyn street cred.
It took us 30 years to build the Brooklyn brand, and I think our brand goes deeper because of that work we've done.
Ladies and gentlemen, the co-founder and chairman of Brooklyn Brewery, Steve Hindy.
Eric?
Steve, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
Let's start at the beginning, the very beginning of your career, which was about as far removed from craft beer as you can possibly get. So,
not from beer, but
well,
from craft beer. Yeah.
All right. So I don't know if everyone in the audience knows this, but your first job as an adult was, well, your first career as an adult was war correspondent for the AP. Mm-hmm. Now, tell us a little bit about that, and it seems like quite a pivot, but let's start with the beginning.
Well, I worked for small newspapers in upstate New York when I got out of college, and at a certain point in like 1978 or so, I had just gotten divorced, and I got in my head I wanted to cover a war, and I was working for AP, and you know AP is a worldwide news gathering, so I said, I started studying Arabic and said I wanted to go to Beirut. And I learned there aren't too many people who want to go to Beirut and cover a war. So like a year after I volunteered for that, I landed in Beirut as the Middle East correspondent for AP. And within a couple of months, I was sent to Iran to cover the revolution and the hostage crisis. And I got thrown out of Iran. I went back with the Iraqi army when they invaded the next year. And then living in Beirut, we had the Civil War, the Israeli War, the massacres in the refugee camps. I covered all those stories and moved to Cairo, and I was sitting behind President Sadat when he was assassinated.
So yeah, that's quite a preparation for entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I liken starting a business to going off to cover a war, because you know you never know what you're going to encounter when you land in a war zone, in a conflict zone. And when you start a business, you have no idea what you're going to encounter. And often, you know, there are challenges that you never imagined. And the same thing happens when you go off to cover a war. So I think actually, it was great preparation for starting a brewery in Brooklyn.
There are some people who have action figures on their desk. You have a piece of shrapnel from Beirut.
Yeah, my last day in Beirut, I was staying in a hotel, the Alexander Hotel in East Beirut, and it was hit by mortars the morning. That was our wake-up call. We'd been drinking pretty late, so it was kind of a rude wake-up call. And I went out into the parking lot. There were a bunch of cars had been set on fire. And I picked up a piece of shrapnel and took that with me, and I do keep that on my desk as a reminder of there are tougher days than today. You know.
Well, of course, it's a straight shot from the streets of Beirut to the pinnacle of craft brewery, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you made that pivot.
Well, that was, that's a kind of a strange you know, a mix of events. I ended up getting remarried to the woman I had gotten divorced from when I was in Beirut.
You have a high risk tolerance.
Yeah. We got back together. We had our first child in Beirut. She's a very brave woman. And then we had our second child in Cairo. And AP wanted me to go to the Philippines next because President Marcos was in trouble. And I thought, great, you know, biggest story in the world, let's go. And my wife said, no, I'm not going to Manila. I'm not taking the children to Manila. I'm going home. If you get posted to Rome, I'm with you, but no Manila. So actually it was kind of, you know, we'd been married 2 times at this point. The second time we had 2 children, and so it was, you know, family or career. And so I gave it up and came back with her, and that was kind of tough, kind of the re-entry. You know, being an editor at a newspaper after doing what I had done was kind of a big letdown. But when I was in the Middle East, I met American diplomats in Saudi Arabia, where they have Islamic law, no alcoholic beverages. They were avid homebrewers. There's a long tradition of homebrewing in all those countries where alcohol is forbidden, including Iran today. So I was amazed how good their homebrew was. I couldn't make beer there because I couldn't get the ingredients. They were getting the ingredients through the diplomatic mail, getting their hops from states. But when I came back, I started making beer at home and eventually dreaming of starting a brewery, and I did.
That's, yeah.
And my wife,
So we've heard.
My wife supported me through that whole ordeal, and I really credit her with starting the Brooklyn Brewery, because if she hadn't talked me down from my Hemingway dream or fantasy, it never would have happened.
So your wife was one partner, another partner was Tom Potter, who was
Yep.
with you at the beginning of Brooklyn Brewery. You talk in your book, Beer School, about the importance of finding the right partner. What was about you and Tom that made you guys so successful?
Well, Tom is a really brilliant guy, and he had an MBA. He was working for a bank in New York City and dreaming of starting his own business. So I had no business background whatever, and you know, I needed someone who could think about the numbers and, you know, the business plan. I did kind of the marketing end of it, and, you know, why Brooklyn and what's it going to look like and all that. And Tom did the numbers side, and you know, we complemented each other well. And we agreed at the outset that I would be Mr. Outside and he would be Mr. Inside. And that's an important thing to agree on. Actually, though, as time went on and we got a lot of attention, there were some jealousies that developed when Mr. Outside got all the glory. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's not a simple kind of relationship. But Tom's an honorable guy, and, you know, we were able to work out any issues we had along those lines. It was really important to have a very clear partnership agreement at the outset. I saw so many partnerships fail over the years, you know, watching other breweries start up and other entrepreneurs in other businesses also fail because they didn't have an agreement, a partnership agreement at the outset that would kick in if there were differences between the two. And so Tom and I had a great partnership. He was bought out by one of my investors in like 2003. So he moved on, and he now has a distillery, New York Distilling Company, about 5 blocks from the brewery, and I'm an investor in his distillery, and we're still good friends.
Distilling, so hard liquor. So beer really is a gateway drug. So Brooklyn's been part of the brand since the very beginning, but at the time, as Tyler said in the video, Williamsburg was not, you know, the hipster paradise that it is now, and in fact, there were some pretty seedy and sometimes dangerous things that happened in the early days of Brooklyn Brewery.
Yeah, well, we got robbed at gunpoint in 1995 on Thanksgiving Eve. Armed robbers came into the warehouse. They grabbed one of our guys, put a gun to his head, and he came into the office, made everyone lie on the ground, and I had to open the safe. And we turned over $30,000 cash, and we didn't have insurance for that. But no one got hurt, thank God. And after that, I spent $30,000 on fences and buzzers and cameras, the stuff we should have had in the first place. And Tom, who wasn't there during the robbery, kept saying, "Steve, come on, man, we lost 30 grand, you're spending 30. I said, "Tom, the gun was at my head, not your head." And actually, those same robbers, the lead guy, came back on Christmas Eve and grabbed one of our guys and started back toward the office. And he saw the cameras and all the security stuff, and he cut and ran. So that saved us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving Eve and Christmas Eve. I guess
Yeah,
you didn't want to take off from work. Huh?
There are a few employees who, were there for that incident, and we always kind of wink at each other on Thanksgiving Eve and Christmas
still
Eve.
Here. Wow.
And we're very conscious of security at the brewery. Yeah.
The path of successful entrepreneurship is never smooth. It's never a straight line. And even after you got going, you had some rough times. And in your book, you talk about 1991 being your worst year. Tell me about that.
Well, that was 3 years into it. And we were selling more beer. We were growing, but we weren't even close to breaking even or making money. And we owed a lot of money. Probably, north of $500,000 we owed to various suppliers. And we couldn't afford to pay ourselves. So we kited credit cards, both Tom and me, over a period of like 3 or 4 months where we didn't get paid. And then I went back to work for Newsday. This is when the first Gulf War in 1991. I went back to work for Newsday nights, editing the Gulf War copy, because I had worked in Iraq and Kuwait and all those countries, so I knew people and I knew the story. So I'd get up early in the morning, go to the brewery, usually do sales calls, sometimes go out and see customers. And then about 2:30, I'd get in my car and drive out to Long Island to Newsday and work till midnight at the newspaper, which I loved doing that work, but wow, that was physically very difficult. And it was really hard on Tom, too, because, he was kind of feeling like, well, Steve's got this fallback with the newspaper, and I'm stuck here, running the company. Tom's hair turned white during that period, and he actually developed shingles. It was incredibly stressful for both of us, but I think even more for Tom.
Well, I think the white hair is a good fashion choice. In every entrepreneur story, there is that kind of wrinkle. There's I'm hitting bottom like 1991, and then there's that wrinkle, that scrappy thing you do that helps the company turn the corner. What was it in the case of Brooklyn Brewery?
Honestly, we were really good at raising money. It's really hard to build a consumer brand in a category like the beer industry. So it was really our investors who, I won't say bailed us out, but who really saved us when we were, we were in big trouble. We owed a lot of money. We were functionally bankrupt. But our investors believed in us and believed in what we were doing, and so they came through at critical moments. Actually, I never imagined I could raise money, but I turned out to be pretty good at raising money. And our first big angel investor was from this very small town in Ohio that I'm from, called Middleport, Ohio, down near West Virginia. This guy was a very interesting man, had started out driving a coal truck, delivering coal from the mines to the power plants on the river. He bought his truck, then he bought another truck, and then he owned all the trucks. Then he bought a mine, then he bought another mine, and he ended up selling it all to the power companies. I don't know how wealthy he was, but his name's Jay Hall. And Jay really saved us time and time again. There was one point, like 1994, when we were just about to start building a new brewery in Brooklyn. And we had a meeting with Jay and his attorney in a hotel in Columbus, Ohio. And Jay is a man of few words. And Bernard, the attorney, just went on and on about the state of the company and, you know, growing, but very risky, blah, blah, blah. And he turned to Jay at one point and said, "Jay, did you want to say anything?" And Jay said, "Hell, Bernard, only reason I invested in this thing in the first place because Steve's from Middleport. Let's do it." And he wrote me a check for $1 million.
That is an angel investor.
It was an amazing moment. And Jay ended up getting bought out by one of our other investors later, so he made a great return. And you know, for him, I think it was, he was truly an angel.
We talked, we're talking backstage and earlier about the point in every entrepreneur's life when you go from being the idea person or, you know, or the best salesman or the best coder, whatever it is that sparked your company, into realizing that you're the boss and that you are now a manager of people. What was that moment like for you, and what were the tricks that you picked up along the way about motivating, hiring, and retaining employees?
I think that's the hardest passage for any entrepreneur. When when in the entrepreneurial stage, you're doing everything, right? You're selling, you're raising money, you're helping out with the accounting, you're driving the trucks when you have to, whatever. And it's pretty clear any given day what you got to do. But then you realize that if you're ever really going to make any kind of money and grow, you got to hire people and you got to trust them, even though you know you're the best damn salesman the company will ever have. But these other guys coming in, you got to let them do their thing, and you got to trust them and not micromanage them. And that's a really hard passage. And actually, I saw a lot of businesses fail because the entrepreneur could never let go of all those different tasks. And if you're going to grow, you got to build an organization, and that means trusting people. And sooner or later, you kind of realize probably a lot of them are a lot better salesmen than I could ever be.
As you were growing your company, did you get advice from people, and who were they, and what was the best advice you got? One of our investors, early investor, president of a bank in Brooklyn, who actually, his name's Charlie Ham. Charlie had worked for McCann Erickson. He was an advertising guy. He did the Coca-Cola International account. Very smart ad guy. So Charlie invested in the brewery in the very beginning. And we had this meeting with Charlie early on, and he said, this is a great plan you guys got, and you got a great product, a great logo, et cetera. If you work really hard and don't give up, in 10 years you could be an overnight success. And that was a very wise thing to say. He was wrong. I mean, it took like 15 years, I think, before we became an overnight success. But that was great advice, and it kind of adjusted my horizon and thinking about what I'm getting into here. Well, speaking of that, you mentioned, and this is not meant to be self-promotion, you brought it up, a story from Inc., from back when you were a young entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah.
The story, the title of it was Entrepreneurial Terror.
Yeah.
Just tell me about that story and why it moved.
That's one of my
so
favorite stories.
Well, thank you.
It was by a guy named Wilson Harrell. I think it was 1987. I think he was publisher of Inc. At the time. And he had a business after the Second World War in Europe where he was importing craft products and a lot of food, big food companies to Europe. And he, you know, there was a big challenge, and anyway, he ended up keeping his company and everything worked out fine. But he tells a story about being shot down over German-occupied France and being rescued by the French resistance, and then living with the French on a farm for a period of time when they were sabotaging the Nazis. And periodically, the Nazis would come to the farm to search for people like him and, you know, saboteurs. And the French would bury him in a field, like about 6 inches under the ground, and they put a straw up through for him to breathe through. And the Nazis knew that they would do this kind of thing, so they would go out in the fields and tromp around and plunge their bayonets into the ground. And he said, that's what it's like starting your own business. And I love that article. I use that story all the time when I talk to entrepreneurs, and it's really true, because early on, you know, any kind of customer, you know, big customer going out of business and leaving you holding the bag, or any kind of product liability issues with your, you know, your product, any of that stuff can totally sink you. You know, lawsuits from customers or suppliers. It really is kind of like, you know, hoping the bayonet doesn't catch you early on. Later you get stronger. You've got more protection from your attorneys and your insurance, and you know, it becomes much more sound. But there's a period where you're really in a minefield, I think. And I think any of you who are starting businesses know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Is there a thing that you wish you had known when you were starting up that you didn't, that caused you the most trouble or caught you by surprise the most, that you'd like to tell the crowd about, that, you know, the one thing to be prepared for most?
I think I learned probably the hard way. Early on, it's very exciting when you start a business. I mean, you suddenly, I don't know, I felt like I became like 6 inches taller or something. You're proud that you're doing this, and people are impressed. People flatter you, and people come to you with ideas. You know, this brand is fantastic. You should be doing retail, or you should be, you know, doing, you know, licensing of the, you know, all these ideas, and you think, wow, you know, I have all these options. Really important to stay focused on your mission and your plan, and not get seduced by a lot of things that really are not essential to success. You know, you've got to stay focused. And I think we spent a lot of time listening to a lot of stuff that we should have just shut out and stayed focused on selling beer.
Were there detours in particular that you regret?
Actually, I think our biggest mistake, I know our biggest mistake, was during the dot-com craze, like in the late 90s. So we had a distribution company. We distributed all these fancy beers from Belgium, Germany, and other craft beers too. And we decided, wow, we can do a dot-com thing where people can order these beers directly from us. In New York State, we could do that. So we could, at night, we could deliver to people's homes all these products. And we thought there was more demand out there than the retailers are meeting. And Tom was more into this than I was. I was a little skeptical about it. Actually, it was a big fight between Tom and me. And we tried to raise money through the venture people, and thank God they didn't give us any money. I mean, I think it could have ruined the whole company. As it was, we blew about $1 million of our own hard-earned money before we gave up on the thing. There wasn't enough business out there for that to succeed.
What was that .com called?
TotalBeer.com.
TotalBeer.com.
Yeah.
Is that URL still available?
Yeah, I'd be happy to sell it to you cheap.
I like to ask this question of all the successful entrepreneurs that grace our stage. You know what the ratio of success is for entrepreneurs. It's a daunting number and debatable, but it's not a 50-50 shot.
Right.
And yet, you succeeded, and Brooklyn Brewery succeeded. So why you? What about you? What about the course of your entrepreneurship meant that you succeeded when so many others failed?
Well, I wasn't going to give up. I mean, it's kind of that simple. Even in the worst moments, when we, were really under a lot of stress, owed a lot of money, and weren't even close to making money, failure was not an option. Just the idea of all those people who trusted us in the very beginning, family, friends, my journalist friends, and perfect strangers like the guy from Ohio who came out of the blue. We didn't want to go to them and say we lost all your money. And at key moments, we were able to raise money to keep going and keep pushing ahead. And that's what we did. And it really did take 15 years before we were on a really solid footing. And I was feeling like, wow, this is going to be a big company.
All right, good. Well, folks, we have to end it there. There's the word from Steve Hindy is never, 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 never give up.
It's that simple.
All right. Steve Hindy, thank you very much. Steve, thank you. And now, if any of you have done the Perfect Your Pitch contest, the moment you've been waiting for is about to begin, and Carl Quintanilla from CNBC is going to take it from here.
Move a chair. Oh. Afternoon, guys. Good to see everybody. As you may know, Alicia and Alex have been listening to pitches all afternoon, all morning, all afternoon, all day.
Morning, afternoon.
Afternoon. And we're going to go through some of the lessons learned, highlights, tips before we bring out one person who had sort of a eureka moment of sorts. So it's good to see you guys.
Yeah,
thanks for doing this. Just in general, characterize what you heard today.
Well, I think there were a lot of people with really high aspirations, and we talked about strategy, we talked about pitching, we talked about building advisory boards. It was awesome for me because I felt like I was part of helping them build a better business. And it ran the gamut, but everyone was really looking to take their business to the next level.
Alex?
Yeah, I think I would echo that, and I think, a lot of people at this conference, I was really impressed with the clear articulation of where they want to go. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's very, very important. It's one thing to say, here's who I am and here's what I've been doing, but I think in business, and especially when pitching, it's really important to also weave that together into what's the next step. And I heard a lot of really, really inspiring examples of that today.
That's great to hear. We've assembled some of your 3 top tips coming out of all of this. Alicia, we'll start with you.
Okay.
The first thing you say is don't be too salesy.
Yes, yes.
What does that mean?
Well, there's a couple of things that can mean. First of all, I see a lot of entrepreneurs pitch me for fundraising, and a lot of times they'll put unnecessary pressure on you to make a decision where they're like, if you don't invest now, the opportunity won't be there tomorrow, or or we promised you this amount of returns. That just doesn't really work, because as an investor, you see hundreds of opportunities, and if you have any kind of unnecessary pressure, it's just easier to pass.
So you're not going to be fooled by supplies are running out.
No, no. And I think, in fact, if that's not true, it really hurts the credibility of an entrepreneur. So you have to be really careful about that. Just be authentic, be credible, be truthful. Right. That goes a long way.
To that same point, you argue, don't say there's no competition.
Yes, because that can come across as naive. I think a lot of people know that. And in fact, I was just listening to the CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings, talk about how even sleep is his competition, right? So even he says, without another kind of Netflix on the market, sleep is his competition. So it's basically anyone who's doing something similar to what you're doing, any other competition for the consumer's time, anybody who could be moving into your market that's a big player, but there's always potential for competition, so you just have to be honest about that.
Without talking your way out of your own pitch, right? I mean, you don't want to you'd throw cold water on your sales pitch.
Yes. Yeah.
And then finally, give them an investment pitch, not a product pitch. What's the
Yes.
difference?
So from an investor perspective, when people are pitching us for funding, oftentimes they spend way too much time talking about the product, the features, like as if they were trying to get us to buy the product. But as an investor, I'm interested in the company holistically. So not only do I want to know what you're selling, but I want to know the size of the market. I want to know your competitive advantage. I want to know the team behind it. I want to know your marketing plan, your fundraising ask, what it goes for. So it's really that holistic view of the company and the investment opportunity into the company.
Mm-hmm. Alex, you say be specific, number one. Explain that.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, there's so much you can say so little with so many words. It's amazing. You know, word salad has become like a language almost. Do you know what I mean? And you know, it happened, you know, today several times. You know, people said, you know, they talked about the industry they're in and the opportunity and how big and how they're going to disrupt. And I'm like, I got to stop you there for a second. What exactly are you doing that's different? Why are you here today? And it's like, oh yeah, right. You know, this is our angle.
So it's a bit of a backup, and walk me through the beginning of this story.
Yeah,
in a sense?
I think so. And I think because the danger is if you're trying to make yourself look like you're everything, then really you're nothing, right? And so as an investor, I'm sitting there wondering, is this person are they not being specific enough because there's just nothing there? Or is it just because, well, you know, they just haven't really refined it? And hopefully it's the latter.
Mm-hmm. Number two, pitch the deal, not the business, is sort of an echo of what Alicia just said, right?
Yeah, very, very much so. And you know, it's important to put yourself in the investor's shoes, right? I mean, it's nerve-wracking to deploy capital, right? You don't know if it's going to come back or on what terms, right? And so while I understand that in many cases when you're pitching you don't yet know what the investment would look like, you know, I'd like to see that you've given some thought to, you know, is it because we're going to exit one day? Is it because, you know, we'll start paying dividends? Something. Show me that you've at least imagined yourself as an investor, because otherwise, you know, I'm not going to get very comfortable, warm and fuzzies if, you know, you haven't even turned your mind to that.
Yeah. It's hard because as an entrepreneur, you get a lot of practice making sales calls,
yeah.
right? You get a lot of practice pitching the product. So you don't get the reps when it comes to pitching investments.
Sure, but you know, the good news is that information is out there, and it's not nearly as intimidating as you might think. I mean, you know, an afternoon on YouTube, you could figure out the key pieces.
Yeah. Finally, be authentic.
Very much so. And
it sounds so basic.
It does, and yet, you know, people don't feel comfortable getting out of sales mode. And it's weird because you are selling, so I'm not going to say don't sell, you should. But if you're going to tell me that there is no weakness to your business model, there's no competition, you're perfect, you have no gaps, like, are you kidding? Like, I'm already gone at that point, right? Like, give me something, be honest with me, like, oh, you know, we made these mistakes, here's what we learned. You know, we're really good at this, you know, but yeah, we acknowledge that here are some gaps, and whatever that is for you, because that is powerful, because, you know, you got to understand how many people just walked through the door earlier who didn't do that, and like, you know, it's very disarming when you actually, because look, everyone's got some weakness, right?
Would you advise people to volunteer that in their initial presentation?
I mean, not in the first sentence.
Or do you wait for it to be challenged?
No, I mean, yeah, great question. Yeah, definitely don't lead with that. But if I ask you, hey, you know, it sounds to me like you're maybe missing a key technical person, let's say. You know, if that's in fact true, a very good answer would be, you know what, Alex, you're right. Here's what we're doing to address that. But yeah, that is a gap right now, full stop. That's actually much more powerful than you might realize.
Finally, I just wonder, how many pitches can you listen to in a row before it just starts to all bleed together?
I like them in chunks of 4 to 5.
4 to 5?
Yeah, and then take maybe like a little bit of a break in between. But then throughout the day, I could probably fit in 20 if I tried, yeah.
Right. But it's to your advantage, I imagine, to be first, I assume, in a long line?
I don't know. I actually, so when I'm on the board of New York Angels, and we'll have pitches throughout a whole morning, maybe it's like 12 to 16 companies. And when portfolio companies ask me where they should pitch, I often say the third or fourth, because people often don't show up on time, and by the time they kind of get settled and their full attention, the third or fourth time slot I think is one of the best ones. But that's just my bias.
Alex, you agree?
I agree, and I think, look, just, you know, a little insider tip here. You want to, if faced with the choice with being right before lunch or right after lunch, you definitely want to be right after lunch, right? Because, you know.
Well, of all the pitches you heard today, we're about to hear from one gentleman who gave one, Daniel Jennings, who's going to join us on stage really quickly. Daniel, welcome. So just because we weren't in the pitch, explain what you said.
Yeah.
To Alex.
Basically was just telling him about a small batch coffee roasting business that I started in college. When it came to pitch to him, I was kind of all over the place. I was very timid at the start, and he kind of stopped me just halfway through, was like, Daniel, just relax, go ahead and get the pitch out to me. Though by the end, he really helped me out with basically staying concise with the pitch. I was, like I said, all over the place, so what he helped me with was when pitching to investors or anyone, focusing on just a few aspects of the business, the key aspects of the business. So what the key aspects for our coffee roasting business are is the educational aspect of the business. So we want to educate the consumer on why our coffee is the best coffee. And the other aspect of our business is the freshness of the coffee, which basically freshness in coffee roasting is extremely important because it's going to provide you with a clean cup of coffee, won't be bitter or tardy when it's going down.
Alex, talk about what you heard from him and what you think the next person who hears his pitch is going to hear.
It's a tragedy that people across this country are drinking coffee that is not fresh. It's awful. And Daniel is going to rescue Americans from this travesty, one cup of coffee at a time in a subscription service. And not only that, but when you become his customer, you're also going to get an education out of it, so that by the end, you can be a connoisseur just like he is. And they will also curate and help make the vast number of choices out there easier to digest and understand.
Very nice. And before we let you go, you're in your junior year?
Yeah,
in college?
junior year of college, yep, over at Muskegon University in New Concord, Ohio. So it's like, yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Daniel, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank
First
you
and
so much.
foremost,
It's
thanks
been
for
an
coming
awesome
on
experience.
stage. Such a good sport. Alicia and Alex, thank you guys for your time
Thanks
too.
for having
Tell
me.
them
Appreciate it.
your URL, man.
Yeah, so it's JenningsJava.com. We, like I said, are very focused on the educational aspects, so you can read blog posts on Jennings Java and coffee in general. .com, JenningsJava.com.
Big round of applause for Daniel and Alex and Alicia. Thank you, guys. So now we've come to the final session of the day, and it involves a guest whom you all probably know. Take a listen.
My name is Daymond John. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an investor, I'm a brand architect, and I'm known as a shark on ABC Shark Tank.
He turned $40 into a culture-defining brand. A self-made millionaire, best-selling author, star investor of Shark Tank, a kid from Hollis, Queens.
As a child, I think in 5th or 6th grade, I was selling pencils to other kids. I was doing anything and everything to make a dollar at all times.
Who became a presidential ambassador for global entrepreneurship. Please welcome the founder of FUBU, the Shark Group, and Blueprint & Co. They call him the People's Shark, Daymond John.
Yes. Good to see you. Oh, what a treat for us.
Thank you. It's a treat for me.
We can't wait. By the way, as a reminder to everybody else, you can tweet your questions for Daymond. We'll read them at the end. Use the hashtag #IconicTour, and we'll get to those in just a few minutes. It's great seeing you live and in the flesh. Your story is already legend, right? Yeah. I mean, it's
Something's wrong with his mic.
Okay. You want to hold?
Yeah, sure. Got it.
Your story is already so well known, but I'm always struck by what must have been an incredible turning point for you. And that's when your mom mortgages the house
Yeah.
for startup capital. Can you talk about how you know when it's time to roll the dice like that?
Ooh, well, I would love to say that mom just said, oh, sure, let's mortgage the house. I had $300,000 in orders, right? And we had mortgaged the house. And, you know, I just believe that mothers are the ultimate entrepreneurs because, you know, they figure it out. They bring this life into the world, and I don't care how many books you read, there is no way to solve that issue, and they figure it out, and that's what entrepreneurs do. So trust me, it was hard getting that money from my mother, because she said, you know, when she got a mortgage for the house, she had to put down $23 for the house, and she said, you don't know what I did for that $23, right? And when I finally had those orders and I came over to her, I said, can you mortgage the house? Or she said to me, I can mortgage it. She said, because we're going to take this money out of the house and put it back in. And that's what we call proof of concept. But to make that story fairly quick for you, I closed FUBU down 3 times from '89 to '92 because I ran out of capital. But I only ran out of $2,000, $5,000, affordable steps that I could take. And then my mother saw me working so hard on creating this process, and we mortgaged the house around '95. So it's not this, you know, whole fly-by-night, hey, I got an idea, let's mortgage the house. I do not recommend that to anybody.
You do talk a lot about the affordable step forward. You put it in sort of visual terms where you're in the dark as an entrepreneur, you're sort of feeling your way around,
Yeah.
You take a step, and you either take another step or you step back.
Right, because true entrepreneurs, we act, we learn, and then we repeat. You know, and no matter what level you're at this level, I am still learning every single day. I'm still failing every single day as well. But you know, you only need 1, 2, 3, 4 aspects of success in whatever you're doing to fuel you to keep going on.
So when it came to a decision like that, I mean, putting your house on the line,
Yeah.
Is it smarter to do that too early, too late? I mean, because no one's going to get it just right.
It's smarter to do it, you know, when the business starts calling you, you know, because you have to be real with yourself about how to operate the business, you know. I was just telling people outside, listen, don't quit your day job. You know, I was working at Red Lobster for 5 years as a waiter as I was, you know, running this business. And, you know, I would put in, you know, 40 hours at Red Lobster for the first year, and then it was 40 hours at Red Lobster and 6 hours in FUBU. Then it was 30 hours Red Lobster, 20 hours of food because money started to come in. But if I would have quit my job after 4 or 5 years, I would have, think about that. Let's say I was making an average of $40,000 a year. After 5 years, that's $200,000 of salary, right? I would have had to sell $1 million worth of more product for food to bring home the $200,000. But I didn't have to do that. I just had to sacrifice time, and you know, I just had to keep working until I found something. And if it would have failed, I still wouldn't have been owing everybody. I wouldn't have had this huge deficit. My credit wouldn't have been ruined for 7 years or whatever the case is. So it's really these theories of quit your day job, you need money to make money. All that is garbage.
That's what you mean when you say take inventory of yourself, right?
Right.
And that includes your energy. It's like a stockroom of energy, stockroom of how much time you have on the shelf, and you make adjustments as you go.
How much time you have on the shelf, what people are around you, where are you weak, where are you strong, where do you need advice, who to put on full-time, but who can you get it to do it for part-time, and how can you trade some other aspect of something they need instead of having to come out your pocket with $10,000, $20,000. The first year in Shark Tank, I remember giving a company $250,000. They went and built a $50,000 website when they needed a $1,000 Facebook page. Right? They went out ahead and ordered inventory for $50,000 worth of the inventory. It was crap inventory, so whether you have, you buy 2 pieces or 50,000 units, if it's crap, it's crap. Now you've lost money on it, and you got to pay for it to be stored someplace, and when people buy it, they're buying it 10 cents on the dollar. So it's all about this whole theory of just blowing and spending money and just, you know, people watch Wall Street and Dynasty too much. That's all crap. It really is.
This is a big theme with you, for anybody who doesn't know. You talk about, the power of broke, which we've all heard.
Yeah.
But you also talk about the failure of the overfunded.
Correct.
Right? Which is weird, because all we hear is about, you got to raise capital, you got to pitch and raise capital.
But you know what we're hearing it from? The people who want to take your money. That's the people we're hearing it from. Because no matter what, in any transaction, somebody makes a profit. I don't care where it is. And all the people, see, you know, all these people in this audience today are working to be entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs at companies, and they're working to build a product. The people at home trying to steal from you are only working on how to convince you that you need to spend money with them in some fashion, form, or sense. Because they, for some reason, have the secret. And I have been holding back the secret to success for many years. I finally found out what it was.
Oh, really?
I didn't want to share it with anybody, but I'm going to share it with you today.
It's a good day to do that.
I'm going to share it with you today.
Okay.
Work. Bust your butt. Get up before everybody, go to sleep after everybody, and bust your butt. That's it. Sorry. That's it. It really is.
And that's what you did. I mean, that's what you did outside the New York Coliseum.
Oh, well, what about you? You think that, listen, many people would say, you just get up here and talk in your fancy suit, you look all cool, right? Nice haircut,
I knew I shouldn't have worn this.
Right? How many doors got slammed in your face to become a successful broadcaster that shares information with us every single day?
Sure.
How many people told you couldn't do it? How many people can get up here and talk like you? Everybody can. But how many people can share information the way you do it in the way that it resonates with them and it's not just you being a blowhard about yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's not easy. No, anybody in this crowd who has any level of specialty that they've done, they've seen people come in their market, go out of their market, tell them how easy it was, point their fingers and say, yeah, I could do that. It's the same thing of being an entrepreneur. You have to bust your butt every single day and become the best you can every single day.
One of the things I admire about you is your ability, going back to the beginning, really, to get in with an influencer, right, and leverage their power for on your behalf.
Absolutely.
So how do you do that without looking like you're begging, looking like a stalker, right? How did you get LL to do that?
Really good question. So, you know, I always found out, I always have thought about it, and whether in business selling to a customer or to an influencer, what's in it for them? And to get to LL Cool J, the short story is I went to his house and I asked him to wear the stuff, but I had already put the stuff around everybody in the neighborhood that were the cool influencers. The person that at that time there was no followers or whatever, but they always dressed slick, they always dressed smart. And I also did one thing. I know African Americans tend to be a little larger, height, whatever, and I knew that the fashion-forward kids, I knew they'd wear a shirt one day, wear it next, whatever, but I knew that the big guys, the bodyguards and all the guys in front of the clubs, they had no place to go but maybe one big and tall store that sold them blanks. I knew that if I made special pieces for them and I made like 20 shirts for those big guys, I know they would wear it 10 times a month instead of one time. Plus they were always going to be big billboards. Plus they were all going to be powerful looking guys or jovial guys. And I made sure that I gave that to the entire community. And those guys became my real ambassadors. So when I got to LL Cool J, he'd already had said, why didn't you give me a shirt? You know? So it is what social networking is, right? Isn't that when we go on Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat where we're liking somebody, they're liking us back, we're talking about that person, and all of a sudden somebody checks into that person a little bit and goes, why is everybody talking about you? And that's exactly what it is. You see, technology is changing. Everybody's talking about how this drastic change is happening. Change has always happened. It's just how are you going to take the fundamentals of what you do and move it over to the new way that is happening. But it's always happened, whether we turn from the agricultural age to the industrial age to the tech age, change is always going to be happening.
So does that mean you are not as worried about carnage in retail or like death of the consumer? Or are we going through just another sort of cycle of tastes or distribution?
I'm always concerned about it. You know, I think that entrepreneurs have to have a healthy paranoia. I think that there is, though, the fundamentals of business. So whether I'm standing on the corner of Harlem, the Apollo Theater, on 125th Street, or whether it's a kiosk I'm standing at in the mall, or I'm standing on a social media platform, it's the same exact way that you have to address people. It's about not giving them sales fatigue by sell, sell, sell. You do like Gary Vee would say, jab, 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 give them more information. Right hook. You have to follow them just as they follow you. And it's the same exact thing. I constantly tell people there's only 3 ways to deal or have a customer. There's only 3 ways in the world to operate business and have a customer. Acquire a new one, upsell a current one, or make one buy more frequently. That's the only way you can ever deal with a customer. And if people overcomplicate these things. I'm a simple guy. I just try to narrow it down to the simplest way to do it.
Of those 3, what's the easiest thing to do?
What's the easiest one to do? Acquire a new one's always the hardest.
Yeah.
right? Upsell a current one or make them buy more frequently, all depends on what the product is, right? So if you're selling a car, obviously making them buy more frequently, you're gonna, you upselling them on a car, or look, exactly what Tesla does. You can hit a button and then something else is gonna work, and something else is gonna charge you for it, right? So it all depends on the brand. If you have a brand that's $1, then it's much easier to probably make them buy more frequently.
Do you have rules of thumb even now of how much cash you want on hand, percentage-wise? What your marketing costs need to be above or below? Debt? And have those changed over time?
A lot of it, yeah. A lot of it, like, you know, my recent thing with my staff and I is always be one step away from the money. You know, don't go, because it used to be, let me make a product, hopefully a retailer will buy it, then hopefully this imaginary person in the store will walk by it, why they buy it, why they didn't buy it, when did it get returned. And now if I can directly communicate with you and market directly to you, then I can know why you bought it, and I can either upsell you, make you buy more frequently, or find out why you didn't buy it. So I want to be one step away from the money. Margin-wise, if I sell to retail, I want to be at a 50% margin or higher. Of course, if I'm going to the big boxes, I would be probably about 30% because I have to go to the price threshold. If I am selling direct to retailers, if I'm going to advertise or market in that business, a launch, I'm going to probably do about 7.5%. I will probably keep my advertising around 5%. If I'm selling direct to the customer because I have full margin, I'll go as high as 17% or as high as 25% if I'm doing Facebook ads and things of that nature because I have more margin in the business. So there's a lot of different things that I have standards for, but I don't want to seem like I'm too polished and I got everything together because usually usually it's come back and like, holy crap, how much we lost? Change. You know, I've had to learn that depending on what the product and or category is.
How good are you now at collecting data and sort of analyzing, sifting through all that to improve?
We are getting better at it, but you know, I always talk about mentors could be are one of the main reasons why people are successful. They're usually more mature or older than they've been through it. I've got a whole lot of really young token millennials that work in my office now, and these kids, I call them kids, they could be 30 years old. These individuals are amazing in the analytics, and they're teaching me. So again, my assets are, I am not a micromanager, but I know to get good people and give them hopefully a boost to rise up in the company and do what they want. And I'm getting more and more data every single day.
Mistakes, you've said in interviews before, we don't have enough time to talk about all your mistakes. But one mistake you brought up specifically is making an album, right?
Funding an album.
Funding an album, which seems like it would have been a natural given the brand.
Well, so FUBU, we funded an album. It was an album called The Good Life album. And here's the mistake. From a business standpoint, if I was in the record business, the album cost me $3 million. But we had some gold records on it. This record called Fatty Girl. There's a bunch of other records, right? We actually put Little John on one of the first songs. And I spent $3 million. But that was when the record business was imploding. But if I look at it from a business standpoint, I was paying for rotations of commercials. I was paying for maybe $6,000 a commercial for 30 seconds. I had full videos done, and I probably had about, $30 million worth of the videos aired, right? Because they weren't charging me for that. And I licensed out the Fatty Girl jeans because it was a song, and we did about $80 million of sales off of that. But I was talking about the business side of if I wanted to open a record label, because we had these big ideas, we're going to have a record label. That was the first and the last album.
When did you know that you were going to backtrack on that idea? Was it right away, or did it take a while for that to sink in?
It was after probably about the 300th person started rapping to me in the streets and telling me that they were a rapper or a singer. And by the way, here's a couple of people we turned down that came over to the record label. Ashanti, 50 Cent, Eminem. We turned them all down. We said, get out of here, you'll never be anybody. And guess what? If they were signed to us, they wouldn't have been anybody, so good luck to them.
If your business is young and you find some talent you really like and they want equity, how resistant are you? Would you rather give them big fat cash before you start giving them a piece of the business?
Absolutely, but I'm not going to give them big fat cash. I would give them, and I would hope that I would give them some criterias and triggers to option in to the company. Because if you're going to take big fat cash, then you have to you have to probably second guess their belief in the company, right? Because, hey, just give me a check because you're going to burn and I'm going to already have my, my interest taken care of. I understand they're probably people that have a lot of value, but is there triggers that they can hit? If you dedicate a certain amount of time or we get to a certain amount of money, play on their ego. The same as I played on LL's ego. Well, I don't know if you're so good. I mean, you could probably take this company to the roof. The same exact thing. FUBU, we have this big obnoxious 05 on all of our garments. It was because it was always 5 of us, but the 5th member never stuck around. It was 5 of those 5th members that never stuck around because they didn't want to put in the time and the energy. So I don't agree that people should just bring people on immediately, give them equity and get going. It's a dating process no matter what.
Did LL ever get compensation for that?
Oh yeah, LL did, thank God, because you know what, LL, I'm gonna tell you something. He was and is a true spokesperson and brand believer. People today, it's very clear if somebody's just getting a check or somebody's dedicated to it. And LL, he would put FUBU in the Gap commercial, and instead he would mail it to all his friends. He is by far one of the best spokespersons I ever worked with, and I work with them all. I worked with Pitbull. I've done the first 3 years of the Kardashians. I did all their product integration. I walked them around this entire city here, and I said, for $75,000, I can get some of my friends, their clothing brands, I can get them to wear your entire brand the whole year. They were like, they'll never be anybody. I heard the same thing about Pitbull, and these are the type of individuals, when you see how big and successful they are, it's because at the end of the day, they wake up before everybody. They're men and women of their word. No matter what we want to think about Kris Jenner and Kardashians, they are about their business first. Yeah. And those are the only kind of entrepreneurs that I love dealing with. Entertainers who are entrepreneurs first.
Is it ever, we're not you, so how do we get through their layers and layers of management, lawyers, accountants, publicists? Yeah. Can we even be expected to do that?
You can. I've seen it happen all the time. I see that what they do is exactly what I did on a different level. They go to the influencers who have 10 followers, 1,000 followers, whatever the case is. They bet it there. You learn your mistakes there and what's good and what's not. Listen, a Kim Kardashian may not be the best person for your brand. Everybody thinks that just because the name, it's not the name. If she has 100 million followers, 20 million of them are girls that love her, 20 million of them are girls that hate her, and 60 million are guys with lollipops and trench coats on. It doesn't, so, if you're selling Bobby Brown, a beautiful makeup company like that, she probably may not be the one. But if you get, 100 people have 1 million followers that are experts in that field and people follow them, for certain reasons, listen, you guys hear me on CNBC, I'm like the Kardashians of CNBC, right? But people like Gary Vaynerchuk have more followers than me, right?
Yeah, okay.
Because of the purity of who he is, right? I got to be careful because I'm on Disney. Mickey Mouse will fire me if I curse. Gary will curse every single person out in this crowd right now by name.
A couple questions, and then I want to ask you for a tutorial for people who want to go on Shark Tank. But one last question here. In terms of keeping a brand fresh, once you've achieved success, once you're a lifestyle, right, like you are, how do you keep it from falling into, some would say, what happened to Hilfiger, right? Where you start migrating to demographics you didn't want to be in from a marketing standpoint?
Extremely hard. It's what I wrestle with all day. FUBU is not where it used to be. But I found, I listened to Richard Branson one time, and it was fascinating. He said how he had sold Virgin Records, and then he went over to Virgin Airlines or whatever cases, and now he has 300 businesses. And he found that he really likes the fundamentals of business, applying it to something new. It's like a Cracker Jack box. And I find that challenging as well myself. I wish I can give you that answer, but I really can't. It is hard to have a brand and keep it. And I have such a huge respect for people like Coke and Phil Knight and Under Armour, because I called Phil Knight one day. I said, hey, how you doing, Phil? I think you're getting into hip hop, whatever the case is, and I can help you with some of these hip hop artists. He said, yeah. We're just scratching the tip of the iceberg when it comes to sports. Goodbye. The man's doing $18 billion a year, and he's just scratching the surface. Yeah. Think about how focused and intense he is. So I do find it fascinating when companies can keep this longevity straight through all the way.
Yeah. All right, really quick, a tutorial for people who have dreams one day of going on the show. Is it best to over-prep or under-prep?
Always best to over prep, but don't come up with canned answers. Come up with what you really know. Don't come up with, the market is $100 billion. If I get 1% of one, I don't want to hear that crap. Come up with what you need to know your business. You need to be excited about your business. I need to feel like you're not pitching me. You're just telling me a little story. And you know what? Maybe I can hop on the train, but the train is leaving regardless.
Is it wise to pick a shark and focus on pitching them, really?
You should pick somebody that you feel works for you best, but if you are open-minded, you don't know that. Remember, we're being interviewed just as much as we're interviewing you, and I may have a different passion for it. Robert invested in a company called Ugly Sweaters. I am too screwed up from the fashion business. Maybe I'm too close to it. He's doing $20 million in ugly sweaters, right? I wouldn't have done that. Lori, I've got Scrub Daddy. You know, you saw Scrub Daddy? Where is he at? He's here? Huh? Where? On the mezzanine. So Lori's done, I think, $80 or $100 million in Scrub Daddy. And Scrub Daddy is a wonderful product. It's a sponge, right? I mean, it's a piece of crap as far as I'm concerned. Shut up! He is she sell anything plastic under $20, Lori can sell it. It is a good product, though, but I wouldn't have had the same vision. Yeah. And he is an amazing entrepreneur. It goes back to him being an amazing entrepreneur. Lori's horrible, but she knows how to sell plastic crap.
It's good.
I got it. You know what? I sold plastic crap. It was a guy that came on the show called Hanukkah Tree Topper. Anybody saw this thing? All right, so this guy comes on the show. It's for mixed faith families and Jewish and Catholic Christian, and it's this thing to put on the top of the tree. Now think about this. There's 50 million Jews in the world, right? How many of them are married to Catholic or Christians, right? Maybe 7. We sold 7 of them. But what did I do? I tell you, we always invest in people. He's my head of sales right there, Maury. Stand up.
Is there a word or phrase that a contestant says that makes you instantly perk up?
It's going to be some sales. Sales is, you can have your own opinion, but you can't make up your own facts. Sales cures all. And no matter how much you're looking at somebody and going, this person's an idiot. When they go, I got 20 million in sales, you go, wait a minute, maybe I'm the idiot. What's going on here? Maybe you didn't relay it the right way that this business is going. Sales cures all.
And then finally, you shoot a bunch of shows in a row.
Yes.
So how are you not fried at the end of that?
I am. We're going to start next week. We see about 200 entrepreneurs. Maury and Scrub Daddy Guy can tell you those pitches range from 45 minutes to about 2.5 hours.
45 minutes?
To 2.5 hours, yeah. You see 8 minutes of it. And we see 100 entrepreneurs in June and 100 in September. You don't want to be the 99th or 100th person coming through that door, especially after that last night we went drinking because it was like one last day. We are like, yo, we are out. But it's fun. It's competitive. I'm sitting on the stage with really brilliant people. I'm getting to see amazing people like these individuals who are doing business a whole nother way. The adrenaline is running. I'm about to either get embarrassed on national TV, maybe lose $1 million, $500,000, embarrass Mark Cuban. I'm always helping Barbara count because she can't count. She gotta take her shoes off, count with her fingers and toes. It's fascinating. It really is.
We got some questions here from viewers. Any advice for ways to balance brand authenticity while pushing boundaries to reach a new consumer?
Very, very hard. You have to pay homage and pay over attention to the customer that you are is supporting you. The best way to do it is ask that person to go out and spread the word. And that is really what social media is, isn't it? It's talking to somebody and retweeting it, regramming, whatever the case is. But you always have to be authentic to your brand because your customers have a certain perception of it. And if they think you're varying from it, you're done. You are really done. They will leave you first. Remember, when you advertise, market, or give communication, it's only for 2 reasons. It's either to educate a customer that you are existing or to reinforce that they are part of the right community with you. That's only 2 reasons for advertising.
Another question. We all have 24 hours in a day. In FUBU's infancy, how did you identify the most important daily tasks to succeed?
Really, really good, good question. I looked at it as what was going to move I always did 20% or 30% of offense, and the rest was on defense, because I would wake up in the morning, I would look at my 10 tasks, I would try to knock out the first 6 or 7 that would put out fires, and then try to make sure that I knock out 3 or 4 that would move the ball up the court. I mean, I love that Chris Sacca, one of my fellow sharks, always says he looks at his inbox as defense, his outbox as offense.
We love Chris. What are some identifiable goals and benchmarks when looking to establish proof of concept for a business or brand?
I mean, every brand is different. It's going to be some kind of conversion of sales. Now, sales doesn't have to always be a dollar figure. Sales can be likes, sales can be how many views were shared, how many times the video was viewed. People always say, can I get a deal on Shark Tank if I did $50 worth of sales? And I said, well, if you had somebody who was selling for $1, you opened up a trunk outside the mall and you sold 50 of them in an hour, that's a big business. Yeah. All right, so it's always the benchmark that you put on yourself. Now, if you have, you know, $10,000 worth of sales over 10 years, there's a bigger problem. All right, and we find that on Shark Tank. Some people say, hey, I did $6 million, and I find out it was since 1977. You know what I mean? Like,
has coming from humble beginnings and becoming so successful made you more philanthropic?
It has, you know, seeing the world and seeing what real, you know, real challenges are, you know, seeing people who's lost everything, or they've never had anything, or, you know, they've lost their entire family. I'm talking losing everything, meaning an enemy tribe butchered your family physically. And then when I come back and I see that we're complaining over not being able to get the new big screen TV, or seeing our animals that can't defend themselves, and you know, and we're doing things to them, it has made me more philanthropic. So, you know, I'm all about clean water. I'm about taking legal guns off the streets. I'm about financial intelligence. I'm about educating our minorities to be empowered a little bit more. I have 3 daughters, a wonderful mother, and my ex-wife and my current fiance. I am surrounded by beautiful women. I'm about women empowerment. About appreciating our most underappreciated commodity in this country, which are teachers. So these are the things that I'm passionate about.
Really nice.
Thank you.
Just as a quick follow, not to get too political, does it matter to small business or entrepreneurs who's in the White House at any given period, or who controls Congress?
Yeah. Not at all. It does not matter, because you can have a college degree from Harvard. I've met a bunch of people with a college degree from Harvard who are scooping ice cream somewhere. So that doesn't give you anything. The government is not going to do anything for you. Listen, I don't care who's in government, but if the top job for men in this country are operating heavy machinery and trucks, if everything's going automated and autonomous, then what is Congress going to do for you? If you don't learn coding or anything else like that, then you're out of a job. You're done. Right? So it's all about educating yourself. And we're at a time when things are changing so fast, you have to remember what your parents used to say to you. Go to the library, pick up a book and read. Go on the internet, pick up and understand how to code. Understand that you don't need a $50,000 website. And if you do, you're going to build it yourself. You are now $50,000 in the black. That's what's happening now. Nobody's going to do it for you. You have to educate yourself. Thank you.
Last question. How do you bring your business idea into tangible products? How do you find somebody who will help you create your product?
I mean, that's sourcing. That's very hard. I mean, even at this stage, we're still sourcing over different countries and different things like that. How do you find somebody? I mean, it all depends on what you're trying to do. Listen, you're trying to make a T-shirt. You go down to a local T-shirt printer or a seamstress and get it made. You're trying to make a heart valve. You got a different issue, different issue right there. So I don't really know. That's a very general question. Very, very hard.
Daymond John, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Wow. You are the man. Daymond, thank you.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.